British businesses from the storm of US tariffs, announcing relaxed environmental rules for car makers. And Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander joins us now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Ed.
Our correspondent Richard Gatesford up at Jaguar has been reporting on the rather lukewarm reaction this morning from the car manufacturers to your announcements today. These changes on kind of green vehicle timetables was something that you were consulting on since Christmas, widely expected, and with the car industry facing 25% tariffs right now, these small changes are going to have very little impact upon companies like Jaguar, who've actually stopped exports to America. I mean, is this all you can do?
So Jaguar Land Rover have welcomed the announcement that we are making today, as has the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. We're restoring certainty to the British car industry here. We know that under the last government there was constant chopping and changing. Rishi Sunak had to U-turn on his own policy, so we're being clear that that manifesto commitment that we made to 2030 phase-out date for the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles stands. But we're also saying that through to 2035, people will still be able to buy full hybrids. So that's cars like the Toyota Prius and the Nissan e-Power, and they'll also be able to buy plug-in hybrids. We're also giving more flexibility to car manufacturers about how they meet those targets on the trajectory through to 2030. So increased flexibilities for them, and we're reducing the fines that if they don't meet the targets, they will have to pay less, but we have committed to reinvesting that money in supporting the transition to electric vehicles.
But I think you just made my point. The main thing you're announcing is you're not going to back down on the 2030 target. You're making some small changes about what will happen after 2030, but this will be small beer and already expected compared to a huge rise in tariffs right now for these car manufacturers. The society manufacturers say that more needs to be done. Is this really it?
So this is part of a package of measures that we are taking to support the car industry. At the budget last year, we announced a £2 billion automotive transformation fund to invest in things like battery gigafactories, support the supply chain, support manufacturers themselves. We're also investing £200 million in the rollout of charge point infrastructure, supported by £6 billion of private investment in getting those charge points in place so that when people are thinking about buying a new car, they can be confident that the charging infrastructure is there. We've got the plug-in vehicle grant as well. So if there's somebody considering a new van purchase, for example, they can get up to £5,000 off a new electric van. So we're not pretending that what we're announcing today is a silver bullet, but it is a part of the puzzle. We do need to go further. We do need to go faster because, as the Prime Minister has said this weekend, we have entered a new global era when it comes to trade, and we need to do absolutely everything we can to be sheltering British businesses and British consumers from that. We've also been clear that an escalating global trade war is in nobody's best interests. That would be bad for global demand, prices, and for consumers ultimately. And so that's why we're being clear about the action that we're taking to support the car industry today.
This morning, on this programme, Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, Kevin Maguire from the Mirror newspaper, have been saying, look, you need to be going harder. If you're going to face up to what many people are calling the bullying tactics, then you need to be aligning a bit more with the EU, being a bit stronger. And at the moment, our response looks weak, doesn't it?
So standing up for British industry is about finding solutions, and an escalating global trade war where tariffs are ratcheted up is in nobody's best interest, because that is bad for global demand, it's bad for prices, and it will be bad for consumers. So what was announced last week, whilst there are 25% tariffs on global car imports into the US, there are 10% tariff for other UK exporters to the US. Now, we're working through negotiations with counterparts in the US on a wider economic trade deal. This is about being cool-headed and pragmatic so that we can get the very best deal for British businesses and protect the interests of British consumers.
So how long do you expect the markets to wait?
So, look, this is a volatile time, and what I'm not going to do as a government minister is respond on a minute-by-minute basis. What we are clear as a government that we're doing is that we will be bringing forward our modern industrial strategy to support key sectors. The Business Secretary last week has also started a consultation with different sectors of the economy to get feedback to inform any future steps that we might take. We haven't ruled anything out. We haven't jumped to a position, as some other countries have, of applying retaliatory tariffs immediately.
But what it does seem, I think to some people will be, look, if on the one hand Sir Keir Starmer is saying the world as we know it has gone, old assumptions can no longer be taken for granted, that this is a new era, globalisation hasn't worked. I mean, it feels like on the one hand that's what he's assessing, and on the other hand the action seems to be lukewarm, quiet and sort of not making very much noise. How can those two things work in tandem?
So we are committed to having an active industrial strategy, and that is what the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, are working very hard on. I do think today is a significant moment for the automotive industry. For years, they've been crying out for leadership and certainty. We are providing that certainty to them. Many of them have been working...
I think they would say that the significant thing happening this week, as well as 25% tariffs, is then being clobbered with a huge rise in employers' national insurance. And compared to that, small changes on environmental timetables will make no difference. And if you aren't going to do anything about the tariffs, why don't you say we'll postpone the rise in national insurance for 6 months and give them a bit of relief now?
There's a simple answer to that, Ed, which is the rise in national insurance enables us to invest in the NHS. At the election, we were elected on a manifesto of investing in public services and getting those hospital waiting lists down. There is a direct relationship between the national insurance contributions that businesses are paying and the £26 billion worth that is going into the NHS. And we've seen waiting lists in hospitals fall for 5 months in a row now. We do realise that we are asking a lot of businesses at the moment, but we also made changes to protect some of the smallest businesses. So 43% of employers won't be paying national insurance employee contributions this year. But if you're going to invest in the NHS, if you're going to be rolling out free breakfast clubs at primary schools, which is really important for kids so that they start their school day well, then actually the money has to come from somewhere. And to be honest, the Conservatives,
that's why the business
saying that
reaction
they
is
want the
lukewarm.
investment, but they don't want to say where the money is coming from.
But maybe that's why the business reaction is lukewarm, because in the end, you're telling business, even though the world has changed, and even though we're in a tariff war, in order to pay for the NHS and breakfast clubs, business is going to pay loads more national insurance, and you're just going to have to lump it. And they might be saying, well, hang on a sec, if the world is changing, why are you just sticking to plan A?
So the businesses that I speak to in my constituency in Swindon, many of them have said to me that they do understand that they need a healthy workforce, and that if you've got over 7 million people stuck on an NHS waiting list, that is not going to help get the people that they need back into work and retain a skilled workforce. And so, difficult decisions have had to be taken, but it is right that we invest in public services, and that was a manifesto we stood on at the last election.
Heidi Alexander, thank you so much for being on
Good Morning Britain.
Thank you.